Hi everyone, Alon Lits here, the CEO of October Health. Very excited to have Rabia Cozijn with me. She's the head of People Management, Technology Enablement for the Transnet Group. And really excited to chat to her and learn how technology is a superpower, both at an individual level and an organizational level. So with that, Rabia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So always love to start off these conversations just hearing a bit more about your career. Obviously, you're at Transnet today with a really broad, really important mandate, but you went on a journey to get here. So tell us a bit about that journey.
Okay. Started off as a high school dropout, believe it or not. Did my matric through correspondence, found my first job in the bank, Standard Bank.
Okay.
Started off in human resources and progressed from being a back-end clerk to where I am right now. But it's been a long journey, a lot of long hours studying part-time, and then realizing very early in my career that having been in human resources, that everything was going to be about technology at some point. So I used where I was in HR to then move into HR technology enablement. From there, it was at that time SAP was the biggest thing, right? So I started off as an SAP consultant at a large telecoms company, and from there moved into consulting, one of the big 5 consulting houses. And then after the consulting stint, started going back into corporate, but moved gradually out of SAP into other applications, and then from other applications into digital business. And when I got the opportunity to move into digital business is when I then decided I wanted to pursue my studies further. I then did a program with Stanford for a year on corporate innovation. And then I did a postgraduate with an institution called Emeritus, which is a collaboration between MIT and Columbia. And I did my postgraduate in digital business. And that's how I ended up then moving into this space of digital transformation.
Sure. So, I mean, firstly, on a personal level, a lot of grit, a lot of resilience, growth mindset there. I think like all those traits that we know are so critical for individuals to succeed. So, really amazing story and clear why your career has been such a success.
Yeah, a success. I'm hoping there's still more to go and more to achieve, right?
Yeah, just getting started.
Yes.
Awesome. So, I mean, clearly you were ahead of the curve, right? Knowing that technology was critical to the future of the workplace. And I think you find yourself in this unique position where you've got a really unique skill set in how technology can be used to help individuals and help organizations. So, I mean, where do you even start if you're thinking about technology and your organization? What programs, there's so much out there, there's so much noise. How do you kind of identify needs, and then how do you go from there? Like, where do you start?
At an organizational level, I think it's very, very important that you are in alignment with your leadership, with your company goals, with the company strategy, because if you don't understand what the pain points are in your organization, then you don't know what technologies to source to solve those problems. So the most critical thing is being aligned with leadership, because your leadership are involved in the day-to-day operations of the business, but they're also involved in designing the strategy for the future of the organization. And that's how I've looked at, in putting together the digital transformation strategy for Transnet. People management was to start with understanding the business first, engaging continuously with the leadership to understand what problems they were having, and then going back and determining what areas of the business could we transform with technology. Now, I always say technology is the enabler. It's not going to necessarily solve the entire problem, but it's going to help the people that are facing the problems to solve those problems. So you still need people and you need technology, because the technology is only the enabler. And that's how I've approached looking at solutions to change how HR operates within Transnet.
Yeah, so I think, again, there's so many important points. I think it's a strategic decision. That's right. It's not something that you just pick something out of a hat and decide to implement it. It's key, and there's alignment to the strategic goals of the business. And then you're thinking about those goals, and then how can you leverage the technology to make the most out of your people.
Most definitely, yeah. And over and above that, if you're in HR, and we call it people management now, right? It's also about looking at solutions that's going to improve the lives and the experience of our employees. So it's a double-barreled thing. You need to look at solving a business problem in understanding the processes that you are trying to automate or enhance with technology, but you have to also ask yourself then, how does this technology benefit the employees' well-being, the employees' experience, as well as then to make sure that it's in keeping with the new dynamic and the diversity of the workforce. How do you ensure that what you're introducing into the business is going to target every employee in the organization and not just your digital natives, for example? I mean, I'm a Gen X. When cell phone came about, when I gave birth to my daughter, there were no cell phones, for example. So you had to catch up very quickly with what's happening with technology to make sure I understood how it was going to affect the lives of the employees as well.
Yes, I think you touched on such an important point around change management, right? Mm-hmm. Because you've spoken a lot around things that are making individuals more efficient, right? Automating processes, and that may be met with resistance. So there's kind of this, in theory, this is the best thing for the organization, but how do you fight that friction, right? How do you show people that this is something that will ultimately benefit them?
We were very lucky that prior to my starting the digital transformation journey in Transnet, and I hope you don't mind that I keep the conversation to Transnet, in the very function that I work in, there was also a huge initiative on culture, value transformation. So the cultural transformation journey started before the digital transformation journey. And fortunately, the person leading the culture transformation was also responsible for the digital transformation, because that's where the reporting line was. And so we found a way to plug the digital transformation initiative into the culture transformation initiative. And we even call the program Plugged In, for example. And what was good about that was that our culture transformation team were making sure that they were doing the readiness assessments. They were trying to understand, how employees were feeling. Will they be ready for new technologies? And understand their pain points in the organizations. What did we need to do to make their lives better? And so by leveraging of all the work they were doing, we could then inform what type of technologies to implement that would address some of those. But of course, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? As long as you get to the majority of the people, and you're going to hope that the resistors are going to come on board at some stage when they actually see that the adoption has improved everybody else's lives, they'll come on board. So yeah, it's not easy. The change management and communication is not easy, but you have to just keep at it. You have to keep at communicating, understanding your people, understanding what their issues are, and making them aware of everything you're doing as you progress your journey. There's no point in implementing something and then telling people about it. Tell them about it before it even starts. Hear them out. I mean, strangely enough, before I got here, I got an SMS because we were busy with implementing succession management. And I got an SMS from the business sponsor saying, we've done a readiness assessment and these are all the complaints that are coming through. Is business ready? So before we can even implement, we already understand what the issues and the concerns are. We will start now addressing those whilst we work on implementing the technology. So yes, I agree, change management, quite a big deal. Otherwise, you're going to fail in your implementation. Yeah.
I mean, so many important pieces there, and important to take people along the journey with you, yes, to give them a platform to be heard,
yeah,
right, and then closing the loop back to them,
correct,
right? I mean, you may not agree with everything that's being shared, but at least you are providing feedback if a different direction is being taken.
Definitely.
So you touched on it, but I think it's a big piece of technology implementation or digital transformation is how do you drive that adoption, right? Because you may have the best technology, right? But if people are not willing to adopt it, then that implementation is not going to be a success. So how do you get individuals across the organization to adopt this new technology?
So we approached it in many, many ways. Like I said, we start off by understanding how they feel before we even start with the implementation. And whilst we've made the decision to implement, so now we're trying to understand, okay, how do we ensure that the adoption is correct? So we understand what people are concerned about. And so when we then look at all the things we need to roll out, be it webinars, podcasts, workshops, Q&A sessions, town hall sessions, roadshows, we look at where are some of the issues coming from, because it's not one size fits all. So just because this part of the business is having this issue about the technology, we need to figure out what's the best way to communicate to them and win them over. Then you have a different segment of the workforce, like we are white collar, blue collar. We need to figure out what's the best way to communicate with our blue collar workers to make sure that they understand. So you have to package your approach in how you're going to reach out to the people in terms of how you communicate, but also in terms of how you're going to train, because very often the resistance comes from the lack of knowledge and not knowing, right? And the more information you share and the more training you provide and the more people become comfortable with the technology, the better the adoption is going to be. So it's quite a process. It's not an overnight quick fix. You have to be at it constantly, consistently, so that by the time you switch something on, people are familiar with it. And again, you're not going to please 100%, but if you get to 80, 90%, it's good enough.
Yeah. So I think it's multi-pronged, right?
Yes.
It's not just doing things one way on Monday and implementing a completely new solution on Tuesday.
Yeah.
There's a process, and you need to take people along that journey and give them the opportunity to learn through multiple touch points.
100%. And also the opportunity to engage leadership. The one thing I have to commend in Transnet is our HR leadership and the learning leadership. They're always available and ready to answer questions, to engage with the employees, to interact with the employees, and to take on the difficult questions and give the answers, no matter if the answer is, good or bad, as long as it's honest. And I think the fact that we have had all of these different engagement sessions where it's not just the technical people implementing or the change managers implementing that are talking to the employees, but the actual leadership team that's there and available to talk to the people has really helped embed and create confidence in the employees that, our leadership definitely has our interest at heart.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the point that you started with around culture.
Yeah.
Right, that there is a culture of learning within the organization. There's a culture that's willing to adapt and do things better and embrace new technology, which is an important piece, because if it's not in the culture, you're not going to be able to drive that change across the organization.
Most definitely. I think when I moved into HR now to start, with the execution of the strategy, we had just hired an entire new bench in people management and learning. And with that comes a whole lot of new thinking, new ideas. And it was very refreshing to see the leadership team here stand behind and believe in what they wanted. And the fact that they wanted to empower the employees and they wanted to transform the way the organization was operating and introduce a new culture and introduce new values. And it started with the HR leadership team living those values, which is how we managed to secure the funding and we managed to get the support that we wanted for the HR or people management implementation for technology. So it starts with leadership, and when you see that leadership are living the culture and living the values that they want to introduce in the organization, then rolling it out, getting other people on board just became so much easier.
No, that makes sense. And I think what I want to touch on, again, you touched on it, is how do you measure success, right? Like you might spend a lot of money on implementing a new solution, but how do you kind of measure that ROI? How do you communicate back to leadership that, listen, we've done this and it's been a success?
So prior to doing any of our large projects, particularly this ones, we have to have a very detailed and thorough business case. And as part of that business case, we need to outline what are the benefits we hope to achieve from implementing such a technology. And those benefits can be both qualitative and quantitative. But of course, very often people are interested more in the quantitative than the qualitative, although you can very easily translate qualitative into quantitative. So what we do is when we implement, we make sure we look at those business benefits that were identified upfront in the business case. And as we roll out, now you can't necessarily measure the benefit immediately, right? It takes a bit of time to see how people are taken to the new system, what they're using, how much time we've saved, how many people are actively on the system. And so we have to gather all of that information to make sure we are able to measure whether their business is actually getting the value of the benefits that we outlined right at the beginning. And it includes very simple things like how long does it take for an applicant who's applied for a job to secure an interview? And now you have systems that can very quickly at a press of a button tell you how long it takes to do so. How many people are we able to now train remotely versus having to fly them in on site, because now we have a blended learning approach. You can sit anywhere and learn. And that's now a more quantitative approach. So how much have we saved in travel costs, accommodation costs, productivity costs? So we look at the benefits that we've outlined in the business case right at the front. And then once we've implemented, we now have to start measuring the benefit realization to go back to leadership and say, this is what we said we will, this is how the business is going to benefit from these implementations. So now we are able to develop those KPIs and measure how those benefits translate into any real value for the organization.
So it's objective.
Completely objective.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that you set or you define success up front so you can measure it over time.
Oh, no, of course. I mean, otherwise no one's going to want to give us money to implement anything.
Yeah. And clearly your ability to continuously innovate is testament to your ability to prove that value.
Yeah, and I have to admit, where I am right now in HR and the leadership I'm surrounded by and the appetite and for innovation is so amazing that they trust you and they allow you to bring forth those ideas, to make suggestions, to do things better. Otherwise, you come here with this hunger and this appetite to change things and introduce new technologies, but nobody is interested. I can't say that that's how it is where I am at the moment. I think we're progressing because we have such a progressive team that's encouraging innovation all the time.
Awesome. And I think that's a perfect segue to discussing culture more broadly, because, from the outside, Transnet's had a tough time, right? Yeah. But, hearing your passion, hearing your authenticity, there's clearly this amazing culture within the organization, despite all that noise outside the organization.
I don't know if you attended my session. I started off with that picture, Hulle weet nie wat ons weet nie. And when I stumbled upon that, I thought how appropriate, because Transnet has been in the media, and it's never about anything positive. It's been in the media for the last couple of years with a lot of negative sentiment, right? And like in the presentation, I said, you have to be part of the organization to know exactly what Transnet is doing in the background. You have to be there to understand just how much effort they're putting to make this company what it needs to be. And so, nobody in the media will tell you about all of these things that we are trying to do to make Transnet, a world-class organization. It is the largest logistics company in Africa, right? And yes, we've been through a lot, but I have full confidence in the new leadership that it's actually going to get back to being a real powerhouse in the future. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, it is testament to leadership. It's very easy, to kind of fly the flag or steady the ship in calm waters, right? But you've had nothing but stormy waters.
I think it's going to change. I think it started changing already, to be honest with you, Alon. I mean, probably since the beginning of this year, if you actually look at some of the surveys that our culture team has done, you'll actually see that the employee sentiment has improved in the organization. And so that's, something positive for us. That employees are feeling more confident about the organization, about the future of the organization. They're showing more confidence in our leadership as well. And that's a recipe for success, right? So I have no doubt that the media sentiment will change as well.
That's awesome. And maybe just to share, if you can, what are some of the things that you feel that you have done as an organization? Obviously, it sounds like that learning culture is there, that empowerment is there, but what are some of those ingredients that have enabled you to create that positive environment internally to keep people focused, to keep them motivated despite that noise?
Again, coming back to where I am in people management, or HR as most people refer to it, just in the time that I've been there, and I look at some of the initiatives that HR has undertaken, and this time I'm not going to talk about the things I'm doing in terms of technology enablement, because your question is, what are we doing to make things different? If we look at our diversity and inclusion statistics, and you look at the demographic of our employees, you will see how aligned it is to where the country needs to be. If we look at the rate of unemployment in this country, particularly in our youth, you will actually see that we have a huge drive in terms of the employing youth. We dish out bursaries to students, we bring them in, we train them up, we let them go back into the market, or we keep them. We had a youth day recently, and it was so amazing to see how many youngsters we actually employ in the organization. So that's the one thing. We also have our health and wellness department that's focused continuously on the well-being of our people. We have numerous initiatives where employees have access to whatever they need to help them deal with whatever they're doing, whether it's financial, whether it's financial, whether it's your health-related issues, mental issues as well. We create this environment where people are able to open up and talk. We have our own women's forum where the women get together and talk about important things that matter to them as well. And this is fully supported and encouraged, by the organization. We've recently introduced leave for, what do they call it now? I'll get back to it. But where people go to study around traditional medicine and those things? We've now even introduced that in the organization, where people can take time off to go and study to become a spiritual healer, for example. When you talk about LGBTQ, we are fully in support of those initiatives as well. And we support functions or anything related to that. So we are making sure that when it comes to our people, and even if you look at the dynamic of the people with qualifications in Transnet, I think we probably have the most qualified workforce in the country. And all due to the fact that Transnet invests in its people. We have bursary programs for people inside the organization as well as people outside the organization. And this is, again, nothing to do with technology, but everything to do with our people that we are driving within the people management function.
Yeah, there's clearly so much care and so much passion that flows through when you talk through those initiatives. And I think also, you're mission driven, right? You're enabling the continent, not only South Africa. So I'm sure that attracts top talent to the organization.
It does, but attracting top talent when there's so much of negativity in the media can be extremely difficult. But notwithstanding the negative media, we've been top employer for a few years in the country, right? And for a reason. It's because we really try to invest in our people, and we try to make their experience at work as the best that they can possibly have. Of course, we have issues around people exiting the organization. Over the last couple of years, we also realized, being an organization that's been around for over 100 years, because that's how old Transnet is, we also have a lot of people that are now going on retirement, and we now need to plan to bring in new people to take over, and that's a lot of IP that's leaving the organization.
I think a big part of what you're touching on is thinking about individuals holistically, empowering them to succeed, thinking about their overall well-being. So what are some of the initiatives that you have in play to ensure that individuals can thrive? And you've said it's there's a lot of negative noise which is not reflective of the reality, but that impacts on individuals, right? South Africans, life is tough, right? It's been a tough couple of years. Hopefully, like the way things are looking up for Transnet, hopefully things are looking up for the country, but we operate in a difficult macro environment. So what do you do to support employees?
I mentioned earlier that we do have a function for occupational health and safety, And under occupational health and safety, there's a lot of work done in terms of employee well-being. So we have very robust EAP programs. And one of the key things that we do when we embark on any program in the organization, whether it's technology or otherwise, we make sure that the employee well-being function is part of any transformational initiative, whether it's technology, whether it's changing the operating model. No matter what happens in our business, there's always the head of employee well-being that needs to be part of that. Why? Because we realize that any little thing in the organization is going to affect how an employee feels. We have different employee well-being initiatives associated with any transformational initiative. It's always coupled, because we need to provide a safe place for people that feel that this transformation is going to affect me. They have a place to go and talk to someone. So over and above our EAP programs that we run, we supplement this with other initiatives throughout the year, where we bring companies in to talk to people, where we bring other professionals in to share, and also then create a room for our employees to engage with these organizations privately, so that if they have any concerns and fears, etc., then it's handled by these organizations as well.
And I think it goes back to the point that you were touching on earlier when you spoke through the digital transformation, that it starts off by listening, right? And because you're firstly giving the platform and then giving feedback based on the points that are raised, you're creating that environment of psychological safety, right, where people are heard, right? It's not just a function of, giving people a platform to say you've given people a platform. You are genuinely listening and using that information to make your process better. And if you can't always accommodate, then at least feedback to employees.
Yeah. I mean, our CE always has live broadcasts, for the whole organization. And even in those sessions, there's Q&A sessions where the employees are allowed to engage directly with our CE and ask any question they want. Those questions are not filtered. And even if questions are not answered then and there, there's always the guarantee that they will get a response with questions that are then collected during those live sessions. So the commitment is from the highest level in terms of sharing and listening and responding.
Sure. So it's really a culture of accessibility. Despite structure, everyone can get to whoever they need to be, right? And everyone's heard regardless of where they sit within the organization.
And transparency. I think the one key thing we've learned over time, and more so now, is the importance of being transparent with our employees. It's they rather get the bad news from you internally before reading about it in the media. And so in that regard as well, we make sure that before something gets into the media, because we're always aware of what's going to hit the media, that there's some communication going out to employees before such happens.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think often organizations, especially organizations like Transnet that are in the spotlight, sometimes you're limited in what you can say, but even to be able to stand up and say we're limited in what we can say, that goes a long way, because at least people do feel that you're telling them what you can within the constraints of the world that you're dealing with.
I promise you we do it really well. There's communication going out all the time about absolutely everything. Even our company performance, they're quite open about how we're performing. Are we achieving the tons that we need to? What is the financials looking like? I think the transparency is when and how you earn trust of your people. And that's why you'll see that, our turnover is not that bad compared to other organizations,
No, and I think the results speak louder than anything. So maybe just in closing and bring it back to technology enablement and talking through a real use case, just because I think it is unique within Transnet, is what's come through clearly is the fact that you communicate everything, right? Another key point that makes it difficult is that you've got a really diverse workforce, right, spread across the country, different levels of, role within the organization. From a technology perspective, how do you communicate to everyone? And it's a large organization.
A huge part of our workforce are blue-collar workers, which means that they're based remotely, and sometimes it's very, very difficult to reach them. So often you'll find that there's a lot of communication done by email. So those people that are connected are fully aware of everything that's going on, and the people that are out there remotely, we struggle to get to them. But we do have, town hall meetings, for example, and we do know where and which days everybody is intended to be centrally located so that leadership can communicate and talk with them. And those are some of the mechanisms we use. However, with that being said, if you look at our digital transformation journey, we've recognized that you can't always rely on town hall sessions and word of mouth for people that are not connected. And you will see that a lot of the solutions that we are implementing now are all cloud-based solutions, which means they can be accessed anytime, anywhere, on any device. So even if an employee does not have a company device, they can still access our platforms and our systems on their own devices. And if you look at the future roadmap of where we're going and some of the projects that we intend to roll out, it actually is about addressing that, making sure that we are able, through technology, reach every single employee in the organization. Because, as our digital transformation strategy says, it's all about employee experience and employee empowerment. And the best way to do that is to make sure that employees can access or have access to everything at any time from anywhere on any device.
Awesome. So it's using technology to drive that accessibility.
I think, the whole world is driven by technology now, and it would be remiss if we didn't, if we ignored the fact that we have to leverage on technology as well to make sure that we make the lives of our employees better.
Awesome. So I think just in closing, I can't speak to the head of technology enablement without talking about artificial intelligence and the impact that that's going to have on the organization, on individuals day to day. How are you thinking about that as a tech leader within an organization like Transnet?
We first have to get the basics right. We've been through a lot, and so we need to focus on making sure that operationally we go back to basics and we get that right before we start looking at advanced technologies. Not that we are not looking at advanced technologies. Transnet was already looking at how to use machine learning models, etc., to do predictive modeling already before COVID had even started. So we invest in people that are able to study in those fields, and we leverage off their skills to bring that into the organization. And I know that one of the initiatives we're looking at in HR is looking at generative AI. I mean, ChatGPT is the next big thing, and if everybody is using it, so should we. But we obviously have to use it within the confines of our business and make sure it's secure and safe. We don't want to be out there putting our data out, on open platforms. So we're looking at introducing that in HR to help employees ask questions and get answers easily, quickly. And in other parts of the business, particularly in the operational side, they're already using things like IoT devices and monitoring, etc., from an AI perspective. So you don't hear about it because it's very much now in the trial and error. Let's see what we can do, how we can do. But we've started using and adopting those technologies a long time ago. Do we believe that those technologies will replace the workforce? I don't think so. I think we're a long way off from having self-driving trains, right? So our people are still our biggest asset in the organization. We will use technology, and I always like what my job is in HR. I'm responsible for technology enablement because I think technology is there to enable the workforce to do what they need to do better. It's not there to replace them.
And I think that's the perfect way to conclude and fully agree with that sentiment. So thanks so much for joining us. I think we spoke about so much. And I think if nothing else is clear, what's clear to me is that Springboks are not going to be our only success story, so is Transnet. So
yes,
look forward to watching that.
Also an iconic entity, right?
Exactly. The next world champion. So
Definitely.
Thanks so much for joining us. Love the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.